Old school looks and sounds in a modern speed platforming package, Spinch is certainly a unique looking and colorful game with a heavy psychedelic vibe, as well as a bit of an eldritch one. Smooth, simple controls with a mostly fair increase in difficulty with every stage, Spinch will provide a lot of challenge for those looking to just finish it, and plenty more for those looking to compete for the fastest times. But that's not all you want to hear, is it?
Well, I don't want to say this is a spoiler-prone kind of game, because it's really not. I will be going over the entirety of this game, so if that bothers you, plan accordingly. Like if you really need to know if the good guy wins. If not, it's definitely not a game that really relies on story, but I'm certain I'll find plenty to talk about.
So if you missed it from last time I talked about this game, my first experience with Spinch was at MagFest of 2020. It was January, okay? God, it feels weird saying I went to convention in 2020. Regardless, as a quick recap, it was the game next to the Paralily booth in the indie games section. They ran a speedrun contest, and I won it for that day, so I got a framed print for winning. The game's not really one for story. Here's the basic gist. Color, like the concept and existence of color, is basically an eldritch horror. It hurts Spinch, and it wants to eat its children. Go rescue your kids from sentient rainbows.
It's just a color. But it burns. It sucks. And it burns.
As made pretty clear by the print, the game's graphic style is interesting to say the least. Like a psychedelic fever dream torn from the 70s, with a sheen of pixel graphics and constant flashing rainbows. It's a platforming acid trip that's confusing to look at, yet somehow completely understandable. Well, understandable in knowing what can and cannot actually hurt you, usually. Most flashing rainbow items are damage or death pits, and some bright pink enemies will also make appearances. Spinch, as in the character, and for God's sakes Google, stop autocorrecting Spinch to spinach while I'm typing. Spinch is an extremely simple design, consisting of a white ball with a face and spindly limbs. The fact Spinch is so small and colorless makes Spinch pop pretty distinctly against the assault of colors. A thing of note is that despite being a 2D game, the game creates its sense of depth not with parallax scrolling, most commonly seen in retro platformers, but choosing an isometric perspective, despite being a fully 2D game. This can cause confusion and hide some items on occasion, like not knowing which point of a wall is climbable, or a certain door might be hidden, or the exact section that you can land on a platform, but it's not that big of an issue overall, just more of a learning curve to understand at times. In going as retro as the game clearly is, this is backed up heavily by the sound design. Not only is the music what most people would consider chiptune, it kind of isn't. Every sound in this game is done by circuit bending, or the process of creating noises from old and outdated electronics, like the kind that you would find in a Speak and Spell or other electronic toy from the 80s, and the music isn't an exception. These tracks are quick, punchy, catchy, and of course, very odd. Unfortunately, this also leads to them being rather repetitive, since some levels can be extremely tough to complete, and being designed as a speed game, the tracks are usually very short loops. A major exception is to how they handled the official OST, which I'll be using for these backing tracks, as the OST is actually remixed tracks of the music from various levels that are just strung together to be a bit more coherent and varied. I still absolutely love the boss theme no matter how many times I've tried the final boss, and some tracks will get cemented in my head for days. Special mention to the second area and the third area music. Again, the sound work is also circuit bent. Spinch makes very distinct and harsh noises with every jump, dash, and hit of damage. There's slight variance in multiple jumps or dashes, and I feel it really ties the whole thing together, but I can easily imagine these sounds wearing thin on a lot of people, so prepare accordingly. I've made mention of this, but the basics of the game is a standard platformer. Run in a direction, collect items while trying to reach the goal. Since the game is designed as a speed platformer, with an emphasis on getting good times, exploration is kept to a minimum. The counter only serves to count upward, and the stages are usually pretty straightforward, sometimes even having you rush to the goal via some chasing hazard or monstrosity. Every level ends by having Spinch enter a checkered box. Controls are basic to most platformers as you run and jump, but throw in a bit of Mega Man X movement style so you can perform a dash both on the ground and in midair, or combined with a jump for a somewhat double jump. Jumping while holding the direction of a wall will let you jump climb it, and holding the direction against the wall will have Spinch slowly slide down it. This allows stages to add some extreme verticality while still being speed focused, as well as affording a decent chance of recovery if you just quite missed a platform. Hazards will adorn the stages, either by taking a chunk of your health or just killing you outright. You have 3 hearts by default in each stage, and if you lose all 3, you'll start the stage over or immediately spawn back at the nearest checkpoint. What can damage you is pretty obvious, as a comment I once saw read, "Whatever hurts you also hurts your eyes." Most of the time the hazards will be flashing rainbows, but do watch out for the pink enemies as well. Most of them can be jumped on to kill them, but it's not usually imperative that you do so. Checkpoints appear as large cubes with rotating arrows on them. Keep in mind that if Spinch dies without reaching a checkpoint, the entire stage will reset completely. Time and cube pickups included. If you hit a checkpoint, you'll respawn instantly at that checkpoint, but every collected item will not respawn and the timer won't reset to when you hit the checkpoint. Speedrunners looking to lock in a solid time might actually be better off ignoring these checkpoints on shorter levels, but you could just as easily take a strategic death after hitting a checkpoint to immediately refresh your health so you can damage boost through tougher areas. It's fascinating to strategize sometimes. The regular cubes are also useful, as collecting 50 will place Spinch in a sugar rush, where Spinch will become invincible, noted by its sudden cube shape and a vast change to the music. The effect wears off decently fast, so it's best to move as fast as possible once you've got one. Keeping in mind your cube count will remain at the same number that you've collected at the start of a level, speedrunners can also strategize by collecting cubes to a certain point, restarting that level, and then setting it up so that they can get the invincibility boost right before a specifically slow or tricky part, and then breeze through it. It's pretty easy to get caught up in the speed game and try to go for impressive times, but it's fairly important that you don't skip or miss out on picking up the baby Spinches. It is the point of the game after all. Each stage, with the exception of one of them, will have 3 babies to collect throughout the entire level. The babies can sometimes be hiding in plain sight, while others might be hidden in caves or alcoves, and behind hidden walls that only break when you run into them. Some might require you to place yourself in serious danger in order to collect them. It's good to know that once you've collected a baby, you have them unlocked no matter what happens. It won't matter if you die, continue, or just leave the stage entirely, you'll have that baby and you won't have to pick it up again. Just don't immediately quit the entire game after you collect one. I made that mistake once.
Last time I mentioned I was unsure why you had to collect the baby Spinches. It turns out the real reason is that they're used in the boss fights. As ammunition. Odd, last time I heard of that philosophy, they gave them a reality TV show.
The bosses are interesting affairs, not fought in any standard way that I've seen in any platformer, especially considering that you're firing your children at them. Basically, the boss will either move around in a passive, repetitive pattern, or potentially actively attack you by firing shots. You'll have to press one button to load the cannon with baby Spinches, and the other button to fire them. One press is enough to start the loading process, but you'll have to hold down the cannon button in order to keep firing. Timing is key to finishing boss fights quickly, and bosses will change up their patterns and attacks in phases, though it is possible to skip a phase if you do enough damage in a round. Obviously, the more kids you rescue, the more shots you'll have. There's a max of 12 per world. The boss fights can also be sped along by finding the Cousins, a group of egg-shaped pink guys who will unlock a bonus level where the big egg will carelessly toss egg children and bombs everywhere. You catch the kids to save them from a pretty graphic fate while avoiding the bombs. If you manage to save at least 75% of them, the Cousins will also grant you a bomb to launch at the bosses along with your children. You can get 2 of these in each standard world. Later levels in the game can get very painful, trust me, so a decent strategy is to take a purposeful death if you lose a heart and know where there's an extra. You can have a few extra hearts total if you collect one while you're still at full health, and if you reach a checkpoint in the stage, you'll get to keep those extra hearts and revive at full hearts if you die. Also, make sure you take your time searching out the babies, and don't worry about speedrun records until after you've collected all 3, so you're not forced to go out of the way to collect any of them. Keep in mind that the leaderboards will only let you have one shot at the boss unless you replay the whole game, though I believe they want to patch in a way to let you fight them again without having to do that. The leaderboards in general are kinda wonky too, as the reason I have the #1 speedrun time on stage 4-1 with a time that's literally impossible to do, it's because it seems to have recorded the time I got from 5-1 instead. Sometimes it won't update the times at all. Bugs are very much a prevalent thing in this game, mind you.
There's really not much more to cover about this game, with the opening being colors trying to eat your kids, and the ending being congrats you saved them. There's nothing to discuss here, so I guess I'm done. Unless I was gonna do something stupid like go over every level. Okay, sure, yeah, let's do that.
Obviously, if you think this is somehow a spoiler, you're probably safe to bow out now. Otherwise, the tutorial is the basic of basics, and a simple story setup taking you instantly to the first world. 1-1 Astral Island. Basically, Tutorial 2.0. It's a straightforward run with a few hazards, and the babies are all on your standard path. Use it as a speedrun practice to really nail down the feel of the movement. 1-2 Sacred Shift. Not too different from Astral Island in its layout, but it's got a lot of floating platforms over death pits, so it's not as easy to rush through. Keep an eye out for the last baby that's hidden under the level's end section. 1-3 Wake Up Worms. An entirely vertical level with no horizontal scrolling. You'll weave through tunnels as Adventure Time looking rainbow worms will burst out of the wall to chase you. If you gain invincibility, you can run into one of them and kill it to get an achievement, otherwise they're instant death. 1-4 Power Pulse. A rather different style level where the biggest danger is this floating pill who will drop instant death screen clearing bombs as the music ramps up. As long as you're inside a cave or you're invincible when one of these goes off, you'll be safe. 1-5 Beefy Boss. The subject of the print that I won in a basic intro to boss fights, it just jumps around in slightly different patterns per phase, and you need to run underneath it in order to reach the cannon and go back to reload. It's also pretty easy to miss since he jumps pretty high, so time your shots. 2-1 Star Children. The title of this stage refers to the pink creatures that look like sleeping cats or dinosaurs that'll roll when you run into them. They open doors and kill enemies, but they can still damage you if they're rolling. There's some slow sections in here, and a couple Spinch babies that are locked away behind the doors that only Star Children can open. 2-2 Floater Force. The level I won the MagFest speedrun contest on, it's a fairly open level with platforms being orbited by enemies. Cycles can be a real pain to get in a good time, so strategic use of invincibility will help here. The final baby and the egg cousins are in a hidden section and alternate path to the end of the level, where you'll have to go under a large platform to reach them. 2-3 Chemical Canyon. Another fully vertical stage, a rising level of rainbow sludge will chase you to the top. Pay attention to the layout of the cubes and prepare to take some dangerous detours if you want to collect all the babies on your first go. 2-4 Vibration Station. The public speedrun contest that I took 3rd place in, 2-4 is a long winding level where rainbow tentacled eyes will chase you through a series of pipes and hazards, with some platform orbiters for good measure. A good speedrun time will depend on how quick you can change directions during these dashes, and keep your dash timing up in general. There's also a decent time skip in a section for those willing to damage boost, but you'll miss a baby if you take that path on your first go. 2-5 Banger Boss. Not too different from Beefy Boss, except it'll also shoot at you in its later phases. The last phase will bounce around in a diagonal pattern, making it a bit harder to time your shots. 3-1 Elevation Station. A lot of wooden platforms swarmed with a constant barrage of pink squids. You can jump on them to kill them and bounce off of them to reach higher platforms or clear longer gaps. 3-2 Power Pulse 2. Not much different from Power Pulse, but the areas of safety are further apart. It takes a lot of speed and precision to reach them. Be wary of the cousins that are hiding in an area above and far past the end level box. 3-3 Rolling Rascals. A level filled with rolling logs. Large buttons can reroute many of these logs so you can safely pass them, but damage boosting certain sections or having pinpoint timing can save you incredible amounts of time here. 3-4 Lumber Slumber. Another vertical stage. This time you'll be mostly climbing wooden poles and being chased after by green multi-eyed mouths, where you'll be swapping from pole to pole to avoid them. 3-5 The Timber Twins. The layout of this boss stage is similar to the first two bosses, except the cannon now moves back and forth on a rail. The boss will also split into two for the final phase. 4-1 Return of the Star Children. So if you're having fun with the quick pace of this game so far, welcome to crashing into a wall. This level and every level in this world has a lot of maze-like sections that are filled with pink water. Get used to Spinch's weird swimming physics here, because it's about to get a lot worse. 4-2, Pipeline Peril. An even more maze-like version of the first stage in this world, the pipes can be a pain to traverse, and multiple paths can end up wasting your time or even missing a baby. You can usually travel outside of the pipe mazes initially to see where they'll lead. The outside of the last pipe maze will even hide a heart, and there's a good chance that you're going to need it. 4-3, Go with the Flow. If you felt you were going way too slow in the pink water, the blue water can force you to fly in a single direction, usually through a tunnel of spikes. Holding the opposite direction will slow you down, and you might have to force a death or restart when you're forced to choose between a left or right path and end up missing a baby with the wrong choice. 4-4, Shifting Spikes. You'll end up navigating large sections of water with massive moving spike blocks. It seems oddly easier than the rest of this world's stages. Invincibility will actually let you kill these spike blocks too. 4-5, Bossy Breath. Of course the boss is underwater, why wouldn't it be? The reload button is underwater with the boss as well, while the cannon button is across a constantly pulsing rainbow lava pit on the top. Timing can be absolute hell here, as that damage pit will pulse faster and faster in later phases. 5-1, The Frozen Chosen. An ice world is the last thing that would seem like an actual break, but speedy movement is fully possible here again. Snow will slow you down, floating blue ice blocks will crumble as you step on them, and light blue bricks are the only surface that actually has ice physics. It's a pretty straightforward shot for this level, and the babies are all on the optimal speedrun route. 5-2, Woke Worms. Basically the ice version of 1-3, it's a lot more perilous though. The worms are also far more persistent. Also, the easiest baby to miss is the first one, as it's immediately to the left of the start. 5-3, Sharpie Squad. Okay, after two very quick movement levels, here's a major speed bump. The stage is filled with orbiters that you'll constantly have to stop and wait out the cycles for. Special mention to the final baby that will require you to complete most of the final maze again in order to retrieve it. Distant checkpoints add to the frustration if you die. 5-4, Absolute Zero. Another chase level where you'll keep ahead of a chomping mouth, with only brief moments of reprieve. Pay attention to the cubes if you're finding it too hard to get through a section fast enough. Also, prepare to constantly put yourself in harm's way when retrieving the babies. 5-5, Bitter Boss. A partially vertical boss stage, the reload is in a room near a damage pit, while the boss crawls along the ceiling firing shots at you. These shots deal slight splash damage when they hit something. Later phases will only slightly tweak the frequency and behavior of these shots. 6-1, Magnetic Maze. Welcome to absolute hell. What you will likely notice immediately is that there is only one stage in this world, and that there's 12 babies to retrieve on this stage. Magnetic Maze is an absolute nightmare gauntlet of controller snapping frustration. This level alone is making me consider a Caution Plus as my recommendation. A gravity switch mechanic that's brand new to the entire game will make what would normally be simple jumps into completely confusing endeavors. There's all sorts of mazes and chase sections involving giant one-hit kill gumdrop monsters that'll give you rubber banding style chases and straightaways, but constantly keep their speed in vertical drops, making it all too easy to kill you when you're climbing or rounding corners. The stage is also crawling with bugs, where Spinch will suddenly just stop in place on the floor as if you've hit an invisible wall until you jump. I've only ever beaten this stage once, and it took well over an hour and a half. This is mostly due to the complete hellscape that's the final gauntlet, where a gum monster will chase you through dozens of hazards over death pits for roughly 2 to 3 minutes until you reach the gravity switcher and have to do the entire gauntlet again, but in reverse while running on the ceiling. I've still never beaten this on my Switch copy. There's apparently tweaks that are coming to this stage, including some more generous checkpoints, so if this suddenly becomes a lot more manageable in the future, thank God, but prepare to rage quit more than a few times. It's a real test of willpower over skill, and I hope to God they get some proper bug fixes and stage design tweaks in here. 6-2, Bossy Boss. The giant face that's been inhaling your children at the end of every level is also the final boss, and a massive monster that inhabits a huge vertical stage. The boss has proper and many phases where it'll suck up Spinch to rearrange the level, changing how you have to reach the reload button and the cannon each time, while also changing up the boss's look, patterns, and attack. It's almost a welcome break after taking on something like 6-1, but it still requires a lot of skill to defeat. If you're a risk-taking tryhard looking to save some time, you can time a dangerous dash around it as it's ducking down in order to reach the reload button instantly instead of having to backtrack all the way. Finish it off and Spinch instantly returns home with the babies, where you'll get the ending and credits.
While Spinch still has some very, very sore spots, the spectacle and flash of the game is commendable on its own. It's a fantastic speed game and a lot of fun for competing for the fastest times. So with a heavy caveat that the game gets its wrinkles ironed out, I can't help but give Spinch a go rating. If the final level seems like a bit much or the bugs are a bit more of a problem for you, consider that recommendation knocked down a point, but there's too much charm in this game for me not to love, and I encourage all interested players to check it out. I appreciate you making the stop with me once again, and I'll see what we can do about getting the next one out.
Well, I sat on that game long enough, didn't I? Self-promo time says I should encourage you to follow my Twitter since YouTube isn't the best at promo, and of course I'm mostly seen on Twitch if I'm not being ravaged by seasonal affective disorder. Those who want to encourage my bad habits monetarily can, of course, support me on Patreon for earlier access to new stops and speed passes. Special high-level support thanks to Neander, Marco, Kaizme, Nate, and A. Smith. I appreciate it. Christmas shopping is already becoming a financial nightmare this year. Who even has money anymore, right?